Hello there, and Merry nearly Christmas. My god, we're like days away. Today I'm going to show you how to make my version of sock rabbits. It's a relatively simple project, takes maybe 2 hours, or an hour and a half if you're really experienced at it like I am. And even the supplies are just wicked simple to get. All you really need is a pair of fluffy socks that are crew size, like standard crew size. Just be sure to get the ones without the anti-skid nubbin things. Then it's just a matter of getting some scissors, some stuffing, some thread, maybe a little bit of upholstery thread, we'll get to that. And then your preferred method of making faces on stuffed animals. I personally have some fabric from Spoonflower that printed on some hand-drawn eyes I made digitally, and just multiplied them like crazy. But, you know, anything can work, like buttons, some advanced or just stitched on embroidery, maybe even those creepy, fleshy faces that people make with Sculpey that they stitch onto a stuffed animal. Like, you could go ahead and do that with this. Whatever you do after the rabbit is made is your own thing. First thing you want to do is prep your socks. They have these little elastics on the top usually, which, you know, works for if you want to keep the sock on, but we don't need it for this project, so you can either carefully go inside and cut as many of the elastics as you can find, or just chop a ½ inch off and speed things up a little bit. Next up, take the first sock and cut a little divot between the heel and the toe. Don't cut too closely to the heel, because that's going to denote where the butt's going to be, and you want to make sure that this little guy can sit down properly, and you can't really do that if you cut too far up. But you also don't want to cut too close to the toe, because then the feet will be a bit too small. So it's a delicate balance, but it becomes intuitive with time. Then make a smaller divot on the opposite side of this first one you made. Then cut the seam on the middle of the toes, so you can have 2 separate pieces. Remember that you're not disconnecting it from the sock. Everything more or less stays together at this point. Then take this new bean shape you've made, invert it, like you're sewing on the wrong side now, and then start sewing up the side of the foot until you reach the smaller tube part. Then you flip it back to the right side, sew just a little bit further up the tube with a whip stitch so you don't see the stitches, then stuff the foot until it's an appropriate size. I tend to overestimate, which will make sense later. Then continue to sew up this smaller piece up into the crotch area. But don't completely close it just yet. You still need to access the other foot the same way you did with the first one. If you did it correctly, the legs should look like lollipops. Don't worry, that's intentional, we'll figure it out in a second. Stuff this bottom half of the body just a bit more, but don't go all the way just yet. You only really need, like, the bottom half to get this part figured out. Now this is the cool part. You take the tube part of the foot and fold it on top of the blobby part of the foot, and just stitch them together in such a way that once you're done, it looks like actual rabbit feet kind of just dangling around. Sometimes you may have to tug these pieces just a little bit so that there's more of like an inch of space between the body and the feet so you can kind of shake them around. But you could absolutely force a sitting position if you wanted to. It's very easy. That's kind of what I have to resort to with the baby sock rabbits, considering they're so small, and it's darn near impossible to pull off this trick with the tiny socks. Right, so legs are good. Now we stuff up the rest of this sock into an approximation of a body and head. Try and bundle up the stuffing so you have an approximate split between the head and body, and just try not to stuff in there because it'll make things easier when you cinch the neck later. Now we take the second sock and cut off just the top part, like before the heel. This is going to be the ears. Invert it and put it on the top of the other sock so that the top ends of each sock are touching. Then stitch this tube onto the top half of the other sock so you have an incredibly long tube by the end of it. You can also skip this part by getting knee-high socks. There are knee-high fluffy socks, they exist, and I've tried them a few times. They're actually not bad. But the regular size crew socks just offer more variety than these knee-high ones. So now the tube that's going to become the ears is stitched to the head. So you take your scissors and cut as close as physically possible to the seam that you just made without breaking it, and then cut along the middle of this tube so you can split it off and get 2 rectangles for the ears. Much like we did with the feet, you fold the top part of the ear wrong sides out, and stitch the top of the ear and a little bit of the side before you flip it over and start whip stitching down the side of the ear, making sure to stop before you really get too close to the midpoint and aren't able to access the second ear. You also still need just enough space to start stuffing the ears as you go down. Right, now we're getting somewhere. This is starting to look like something. Take that one bit of the sock that you didn't stuff as much in the middle, and that's going to be the neck point. Now this is where the upholstery thread comes in, as you basically choke the poor thing and do a running stitch, I think it's a running stitch, around the neck and cinch it tightly, tie a knot in the back, and then do it again a second time just to be sure that it is both secure and it's real thin. I guess you could also do this with a ribbon too, just tie it real tight and then sew it onto the neck. I've never tried that before, but I'm not really one for, giving my rabbits bow ties. Alrighty, so now all that's left is the arms. We're just gonna go ahead and chop off the toe of the sock. I have yet to figure out what to do with these discarded heels, but I'll figure something out. And then we'll take it and make almost a triangle from, the base of it to the toe, so it gets that same lollipop vibe. Then we cut down the middle so everything's symmetrical, and then just invert it and sew it all the way up. If you're lucky, you'll have just enough thread after you've gone up the arm to stitch the arm onto the body. But be sure to stuff the hands first before you go about doing that. And with that, your baseline is done. Let me just add a few personal touches to my sock rabbit here. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that tutorial of how I made this lad here. I hope you enjoy making your own sock rabbits for a possible last-second Christmas gift or just in general for your rabbit-loving friends. If you want one of mine, unfortunately this lad won't be for sale until at least March. I want to try and save this guy and the rest of his batch for CT GamerCon. But I do have some leftovers from my previous con season on Etsy, so if you want to check those out, go right ahead. I cannot guarantee a delivery by Christmas, especially this late in the game. And as much as I would appreciate that, I'm also more intrigued to see what you guys come up with now that you have the pattern in your heads. Yeah, hi, I'm editing right now and realizing that is a guarantee. It is not going to make it to your house by Christmas, and I don't want to get that assumption to anyone, so just maybe wait until, January or something. By then, the post should be fine. Anyway, back to the original. Well, that's it for now. I'll see you guys in a future video, and have a good night. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.